Thank you, Michael. Please remain standing. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Bev will leave it.
All right, ready to get set. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everyone. Have a seat.
Welcome our online people.
Hi, everyone. We want to welcome all our online people.
Mike, we broadcasting? Yes? We're good. Go right ahead.
Hi, everyone. Welcome tonight to our ACT Cleveland chapter meeting. We're glad you joined us online.
I want to talk about a few things before we get into tonight's program. And then Bev has got a couple of things she'd like to talk about as well. People have asked me about Club Motor Estates, our normal meeting location. It is still closed. So we're not meeting there based on our own doing. They're just closed. They have been closed since last June. They're having some difficulties over there. A lot of red tape. And I don't foresee us being there for a while, so we have our meetings planned out through June. We'll be here again in May and then also in June, and I'll give you those details shortly. How many people have not or are not watching our webinars? To be honest here. I got big shoulders. My feelings will be hurt, but I will get over it. Okay, so if you are apprehensive to do that because you're unsure how it works, or if you're worried about your data, or whatever, please see me, and I'll explain to you how it works. I'll also take the time with you to teach you how it does. We'll have a one-on-one so I can show you how easy it is. Because quite frankly, if you think about it, we had a meeting here in November. We had a meeting here at Club Motor Estates in June. But those of you who don't watch the webinars, you missed a ton of information in between all summer and then during the fall. So this is just the way of the future. What's going to happen is we're going to be doing things online a lot more because we can't always meet. So far, so good. We're fortunate to be here. But I want you to know that that's something you really want to do. We're also going to be making some other changes. Our Gmail account will be closing on April 1st, so please don't email me there. We're getting rid of Gmail. We're getting off of Google Chrome. They have a lot of issues going on with tech giant censorship. We're updating our, for the lack of a better way of saying it, we're updating our website, but not really. We're going to be dumping the website, and we're actually creating a private network. So for all of you who eventually will learn how to log in with a user ID, or I'll be sending texts or emails that simply say, new meeting content available. That can't get censored by anybody. It can't get stopped. It's unbelievable. I would have never guessed when I started doing this almost 6 years ago that our mailing list would grow like it has, but also that we would be having issues getting information to people. Emails would bounce, and they shouldn't be bouncing. This is censorship. The algorithms are in tune or tweaked and such that certain words won't get to people. And there's a variety of things. It's on both ends. It's no matter who we use or who's hosting your emails. This will be a gradual process, something we'll be introducing. And I think you'll be pretty pleased once we get to that. We're learning it right now. We just got set up with it. And actually what will happen is I'll start introducing this one-on-one to certain people, build a little bit of a group who can talk to their friends that are in this organization and get everybody on board slowly with it. And then the person who used to run the Geauga County Tea Party is very extremely tech savvy, and it's his company, and I'm working closely with him. So is Tom Z, by the way, so Tom Zawistowski and other leaders. So we're kind of doing this all together at the same time. So we'll keep you posted, but he'll have meetings and we'll be teaching everybody on that. Okay, before that, let Bev tell you a few things and then we'll move on.
A few announcements. Normally, Pastor Al opens our meeting with a prayer. I would like everyone to know that Pastor Al's wife, Kim, lost her mom today, and they're on their way to her hometown out of state for the funeral and everything. Her mom's been ill for a long time. So please keep Pastor Al, Kim, and their family in your prayers. Tonight's handout, it's 5 articles all stapled together. We're a little short on paper this month, so we're asking 1 per household. We do have some left. If you don't have a handout in your household, Stacy Brewer, Handy Dandy Stacy, is going to come around, and if you need a handout, let her know, okay? Thanks on that. Last month we heard from, yes, raise your hand as Stacy walks around and she'll see you. Last month on March 4th, we heard from Patrick Wood. Mike and I were very blessed to be in Phoenix on that day, and we actually met with Patrick for 2 hours in the morning, and we learned a lot of really interesting stuff. I want to talk to you about a couple things regarding him, and then we'll move on to my last announcements. The first 2 books that Patrick Wood published with Tony Sutton were called Trilaterals Over Washington. If you buy the 2 volumes online, it's $30. And I thought, man, all I keep doing is buying more books online. So I searched, and I actually found free PDFs of Trilaterals Over Washington. So we'll have those links to you at some point in time. Now that we don't have a website, it might be a little while. But if you search Trilaterals Over Washington, volumes 1 and 2, you will be able to download those for free. It tells you about the history of the Trilateral Commission and the hundreds and hundreds of people in America that have been working against us since the 1970s. Some of the names will shock you. They were very high up people in Republican administrations. The first volume came out in 79, the second volume in 81, and then Anthony updated it in 94 called Trilaterals Over America. All of this was just free and downloadable. So if you're interested in the nitty-gritty of that, that's good. We have both of Patrick's books on sales at the back of the room. The first is Technology Rising, and then Technology, the Hard Road. Technocracy Rising and Technocracy, the Hard Road to World Order. So Patrick asked that we try to encourage the sale of those books, and we did. I got a couple of really neat announcements. My husband, Michael, has been invited to speak at a national security conference in Israel in May. It's being put on by Dahal Disabled Veterans. It's an organization of 50,000 disabled veterans in Israel, and he is going to be speaking on the legislative work he did here in Ohio, Tennessee, and to some extent in Florida, challenging BDS here on campuses. So we're very proud of Michael, and hopefully he'll represent us here from our chapter also. Also, starting tomorrow is the National Religious Broadcasters Annual Conference or meeting in Anaheim, and Michael will be representing PJTN along with Lori Cardoza-Moore. He's been invited to some very high-level events and meetings at that conference, and maybe he'll bring us back some names for some speakers. So I just want to share with you that we keep working hard, and I am very proud of my husband for both of these things.
Okay, I'm remiss maybe in welcoming our online audience. We have people watching from around the country, and I want to welcome them to this evening. You mentioned Patrick Wood. Michael, bring up our PowerPoint, please. Make sure you shared the screen. While we're waiting for that to load, if you could, there we go. Okay, advance it. Please silence your cell phones. I should have mentioned that earlier, if you would. Okay, we are known as ACT Cleveland, the Cleveland chapter of ACT for America, national organization. Our mission is a little bit different than national organization. We are basically exposing the red-green axis, communist socialists, the technocrats. That's what we introduced last month with Technocracy Rising and Patrick Wood's presentation about technocracy, and the Islamic Jihad and how they are all working together to subvert our republic. Next slide. Destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers. This was a key phrase that was used in the explanatory memorandum, the document that was used, written by CARE in their plan for how they were going to subvert us in North America. And we're focusing on this, sabotaging our house by their hands. That means us, okay? Not us in the room, but the people, like I mentioned before, the red-green axis. Where their hands are using, and the hands of the believers, that would be the Muslims or the Islamists. Next slide. Progressive socialist Marxists in both political parties, Hollywood, media, and academia. Next slide. By their hands, one of the many ways that they're doing this is through censorship. I talked about that earlier. Next slide. Why has Europe caved to the Islamic blasphemy laws and the Sharia? Big time bucks. Big bucks, folks. Next slide. Why will we cave to the Islamic blasphemy laws and the Sharia? Question mark. Still open. Next slide. Told you that you've got UN 1618, and I'm repeating this because we have a lot of new people watching online or in the room. When Hillary was Secretary of State, the OIC, which is the largest voting bloc in the United Nations, they're called the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, put together a 10-year plan, introduced it in 2005, how to stop worldwide criticism of Islam. Okay, and so Hillary went along with it. It started in Istanbul, Turkey, with something called the Istanbul process. People said, well, that can't possibly be how we're going to do that. And Hillary said, well, we can't really do that because we have the First Amendment. However, there are ways we can get this done. Next slide. Ways to stop criticism, here we're seeing it. Censorship by YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and also now deplatforming by PayPal. Eventbrite, people ask me about Eventbrite. Eventbrite did not affect us tonight, but we're anticipating they will. They dumped Brigitte, she's on a national book tour with her new book, Rise, and they scrapped her about a week ago, just canceled her out of nowhere under terms and conditions that supposedly Act for America violated. So that's happening. We're anticipating a problem, so we're going to be looking for a different source. Ultimately, when I talk to you about that private network we're developing, well, then we won't even need another source for registration because the registration will be on our private network. And then those of you who are concerned about data, well, hey, if you trust me and Bev, then you got nothing to worry about. Your data won't go any further than that. And quite frankly, and if we don't trust anybody, then what's the point? Why are we just going to shell somewhere? So at some point, we got to trust somebody. So that's why I'm trying to tell you that we're making moves to anticipate all this trouble. Next slide. This is called Silicon Valley censorship, and we've seen articles that expose these open source documents that are explaining how the Muslim Brotherhood, otherwise a couple of the organizations specifically, CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and Islamic Relief, are funding or donating to Silicon Valley and vice versa. So they have a relationship that's unfortunately growing. Next slide. So our mission this year is expose the censorship and show how also through sustainable development, Islamization advances. Now, for those of you who read our emails, I had sent out an update to our last meeting. It was called meeting recaps, that's what they are, and it talked about some highlights, and it showed the video of Patrick Wood's presentation to us, and then I also promised you an update about what we had accomplished even before we started our Act for America chapter. Actually, I should say what Bev accomplished, along with several people that happen to be in the room this evening, in their fight against UN Agenda 21 locally here. We have found in further study that the Islamic world believes that they will be a leader in UN Agenda 2030 and sustainable development. Again, this is them saying this. specifically United Arab Emirates. So without getting into too much details, at some point I'm just bringing this up to people's attention, and we will be furthering this, everybody's education upon this. But all of this allows Islam to grow. And the way it also, the left is using sustainable development or climate change to advance the cause of Islam, specifically the Muslim Brotherhood in our country. Next slide. In February, we had Heggy Storhag. She spoke to us from Norway about what is happening there, the Islamization of Europe and specifically Norway. She lived over there. She's a courageous woman, very humble. It was a webinar. Once our website's under construction until we get this new private network going, and then we will put her presentation back up on there for you to watch it. And of course, I'll give everybody an update when that's available. That was on the heels of our meeting here in November with Claire Lopez, and everybody that attended got Europe's Last Stand. How many watched it? Hands sheepishly go up. Okay. All right. So if you've got that video, please watch it. It's called Europe's Last Stand, done by the Christian Action Network. Next slide. Earlier this month, we had Patrick Wood. There he is. Second time we've had him. I also got a lot of positive feedback after that presentation. And then one of the common pieces of feedback that I've gotten was when you had Patrick the first time in October of 2016, we didn't quite get it. But now we watched him this time, and the light bulbs went off for people. And I understand what current conditions are, what we're going through, and what he has to talk about, how that's all manifesting itself. Next slide. Agenda 2030, Agenda 21, sustainability, climate change. They're all related. This is the new Green Deal, by the way, folks. It's just, this is the official thing. Notice 2030 there. Well, if you've been following OAC or AOC or whatever her name is this week, you know, she said we got to, 11 and a half years left, right? So that takes us to 2030. If you saw Beto or whatever his name is, he said the same thing. We got less than 12 years left. Again, going to 2030. They know what they're doing, folks. They're pushing this UN Agenda 2030. That's what that is. Next slide. It's all about building safe and inclusive communities. Inclusive is the key word, man. If you don't allow this marginalized community in, then you're not being inclusive, you're not being tolerant. So, and quite actually, I'm grateful, as I said this morning on the radio, about all this censorship that it's affecting not just criticism of Islam and supposed Islamophobia, but you see it in everything. Yeah, you see it in if you don't like the fact that a guy can go into a girl's bathroom, you don't want to use the proper gender pronoun. I mean, it's getting nuts out there, folks. So this is all part of this. Next slide. Sustainable development goals and the role of Islamic finance. We will be under Sharia. We won't even know it's happening because corporations and the banks will be submitting to this, okay? And the European leaders look at this as, it's no big deal. It's just some codes we've got to work around. So, next slide. You can find, well, you will find Patrick's presentation in most of our previous when we get our private network built. Right now it's at cleveland.org, but you won't see anything there. But our email address, this is most important, info@cleveland.org. And please keep it to communication, emails. I get so much stuff, and I get so much stuff copied from the same people. I don't want like 1,000 emails today. So please just email me pertinent one-on-one emails to that email address. Next slide. Monday, April 15th will be a webinar. This is General Thomas McInerney. You've seen him on Fox News. He will be with us live online, not live. The webinar only, Monday, April 15th. So, you know, yeah, it's tax day, but I would trust that I would think most people in this room probably have their taxes done by then. Play that first video there, Mike.
You say that this could be a false flag operation, that it shouldn't be a foregone conclusion that this is the Russians. Wait, first of all, did I say it right? And do you agree with that? How come?
Well, you said it exactly right, Melissa, and here's why I agree. The fact is that because the intelligence agencies would not come up on Capitol Hill and testify in front of both the Senate and the House Intel committees tells me something that they are holding back. In addition, I think that Mr. Trump has got a lot of sources with General Mattis, with General Flynn, and General Kelly from the Pentagon and inside the bureaucracy that are feeding information to them that are saying, do not believe this. This whole thing has been a charade. It is tactical deception. They do not want the Trump administration to start looking in at the violation of the Espionage Act by Hillary Clinton with her rogue server and by the president who used a pseudonym on her rogue server, and they both are in violation of the Espionage Act. They do not want this to come out. So they have brought up all these other facts about Russia and why they lost the election. But that's where the trouble is, let alone the Clinton Foundation.
Thank you, Mike. Back to the PowerPoint. So that was an interesting conversation. That was a clip from Fox Business last year, as a matter of fact, or maybe even in 2017. I don't remember exactly, but we had a Zoom with the general yesterday, and he virtually shared the same thing, that this whole Russian collusion nonsense was a hoax and was a distraction, a deflection, so that the narrative, if you notice, the media kept us in the news constantly, but we didn't talk about Hillary's server. We didn't talk about Benghazi. We didn't talk about Uranium One exactly. I mean, there's so much more. So we'll see FISA abuse. Any of it wasn't covered. Also, by the way, the general, we'll see if he gets into it that night. I asked him to. So he had exposed back in March of 2017 a program called the Hammer, which was an NSA spying program, and that's what the Obama administration used on Trump when they were surveilling him. And everybody kind of made fun of Trump that he was getting, I forget how he put it, he wiretapped or whatever, but he knew what was happening, that they were surveilling him. So that's what program that was used. But General McInerney will be with us. So emails will go out by the end of the week on this. There's a registration link on it. You click on the registration. You get an email from Zoom confirming that you registered. If you don't get that email, chances are you did something wrong, like you put in the wrong email address. Once you get that confirmation email, you should be good to go. You'll get emails from me along the way the next couple of weeks with updates on the whole thing. But once you've got that confirmation, you're good, and then you should get reminders like a day before the webinar and also an hour before the webinar, where it actually has the link to click on. You click on the link, and you can watch at home. That's how you get it. For those of you online tonight watching, we've done this before, maybe it's the first time, we will do questions and answers tonight. And what will happen is I have a room full of people here. We're going to take questions from them, and then I'm going to sit at the computer and take some questions from the online people as well. So we'll ask our speaker, Chris Gaubatz, to try to get everybody's questions answered this evening. Next, let's see if this works here. You got to put it on the... Okay, next one. Okay, on Monday, May 13th, so we'll be back here. We'll have David Boris is driving up from the south. He's a retired police chief, was also a retired colonel in the Army. I believe I got to check my details there. But if you remember, those of you who attended a meeting with us in January or March last year, we had Dick Manasari from Detroit talking about Sharia Crime Stoppers, and we had Tom Trento in March again talking about Sharia Crime Stoppers. And they said if we can get police together, law enforcement, retired law enforcement, and they want to take training about Sharia crime, that there was going to be a means to do it. Well, we weren't able to necessarily put together a statewide program for this, but David decided to do things a little bit different, do some things online, but also he's traveling. So he is coming to town. He'll be here on Monday, May 13th. If you are involved in law enforcement in any way and you think that he will be here for a few days, so he's looking for some other avenues to talk to, whether you're active or retired, he's willing to talk. It's not going to cost you anything, and he'd be willing to speak to your group. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Next slide. Didn't work. Brigitte Gabriel, our founder, visited Ohio in May of 2016. We had her in Dayton, Columbus, and also Broadview Heights back in May of 2016. That's a picture of her with Pastor David Forbes, who is the pastor at the Columbus Christian Center. It's near the airport down in Columbus. He's a very strong, conservative Christian pastor, biblically based, and he hosted her. And the next slide. Well, she will be back at his church on June 3rd. It's a Monday evening at 7 o'clock. The best I could do this time around, folks, with Club Motor not open. We're going to bring her to Columbus, and there's her new book, Rise in Defense of Judeo-Christian Values and Freedom. So we'll be glad to have her down there on Monday, June 3rd. Sometime early May, I'll be sending emails out about this. Certainly, if you have any questions, you can email me about it as well. Next slide. Okay, Monday, June 17th, 2 weeks after that, we'll be back here with Alex Newman from the New American Magazine. He will be in person and online. For those of you familiar with Patrick Wood's work, maybe watching online with him this evening, Alex does work with Patrick and does know him, attends his conferences. Now, I gave you Bev prepared 5 different handouts tonight. One of the articles is from Alex, and it's from 2014. I did that purposely. I went back in time 5 years, talking about Henry Kissinger and the New World Order. So people say, well, come on, Dan, are you getting a conspiracy theory on it? Well, Alex just attended the World Government Summit in the United Arab Emirates. Okay? This was in early March. So he has the scoop on these people and what's going on. Our media does not report it. The main sponsor of that summit was CNN. Did you hear anything about CNN talking about a world government summit? So you wonder why they're for open borders, folks? They have big plans for us. Okay, next slide. Tonight's guest is Chris Gaubatz. He'll be talking about CARE and some other things, but before we get to Chris, we've got a couple more things. We're going to dig a little bit deeper on our own with CARE. Next slide. There's a 2-minute video from CARE at one of their recent... This was posted by Amy Meck on Twitter.
CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. I would like to welcome everybody tonight to our congressional reception honoring our 3 Muslim Congress members.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Usually about 40 to 40 American Muslims run for public office. In the past 2 years alone, more than 270 American Muslims ran for public office in an unprecedented number. 131 of them won seats at this local, state, and federal level. The American Muslim community would spend about $500,000 giving contributions to candidates that they like. In the past 2 years, the American Muslim community has spent $18 million to support candidates that support their issues. So it gives me great honor and pleasure to introduce to you our representative, Andre Carson.
It's more than just about having 3 Muslims in Congress. I think symbolically it has great value. But I won't rest until 2020. We have 5 more members of Congress. 2022 and 24, we have 10 more Muslims in Congress. In 2030, we may have about 30, 35 Muslims in Congress. Then we're talking about Madam Chair Rashida. We're talking about Madam Chair Ilhan. Hell, we could be saying Speaker of the House Ilhan, Speaker of the House Rashida. Senator Rashida, Governor Ilhan, President Fatima, Vice President Aziza, inshallah.
Okay, so did you catch that? 270 ran for office, 151 ran, and we have a sitting congressman up there not talking policy. He's talking about it's more important to just get Muslims in. Doesn't matter what their policy is, just get them in office. Now, We know this is coming. They told us in their plans they were going to be here, they were going to immigrate, they were going to set up organizations. They've done that. Now they're getting into politics. Okay, so fine. Next slide. Okay, let's watch the video here. A little expose courtesy of Glenn Beck about Ilhan Omar.
I want you to give this to any reasonable Democrat that you know, because I don't think Democrats hate the country. Some do, but so do some people on the right, I guess. We all are in this together. And ask them, if you believe the information surrounding President Trump's dealings with Russia are enough to warrant an investigation, imagine a scenario like this. Let's say word leaked out that actual Russian spies set up a propaganda and fundraising network here in the United States and used it to spread lies and advocate for Russian interests and bilk us of millions of dollars and give it to rebels. Then that organization got busted for it, outed in federal court, but despite that, President Trump would continue to use their information and actively fundraise for them here in the United States. I think you'd be out of your mind with rage. I know I would be. I'd be standing with everybody else who this has got to stop. I'm going to show you that's exactly what is happening with Congresswoman Omar. She is engaging in exactly the same thing. Exactly. I mentioned last week that Omar would be in Los Angeles to give the keynote address for the fundraiser for CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. As usual for Omar, the media just goes, oh yeah, okay, big deal. And oh boy, big deal, it's CARE. Well, let me give you a quick refresher on who CARE actually is. This is the actual court case from the United States of America versus the Holy Land Foundation. This case is so important because what it revealed was, for the first time, an elaborate scheme launched by the Muslim Brotherhood to tip American sentiment towards the Palestinians, tip it in policy, in sentiment, and to raise money to support Hamas. They were officially designated a foreign terrorist organization. Now, if anyone doubts whether the Muslim Brotherhood had a role in the creation of Hamas, or if they advocated for violence, you don't have to look any further than this. This is the official Hamas charter. Article 2 states, and if I may quote, the Islamic resistance movement, that's Hamas, is one of the wings of the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. The Muslim Brotherhood movement is a world organization, the largest Islamic movement in the modern era, end quote. Okay, so Muslim Brotherhood was involved, but it's a peace movement, you would say. Well, I'm sure it says it someplace in the charter. In fact, oh yeah, here it is in Article 13. And again, I quote, peace initiatives. The so-called peace solutions and all international conferences to resolve the Palestinian problem are all contrary to the beliefs of the Islamic resistance movement. Next page. There is no solution to the Palestinian problem except by jihad. All right. So the Muslim Brotherhood created Hamas very specifically to destroy Israel, but they also created Hamas support groups all over the world. So Hamas is in Palestine, then you have the Muslim Brotherhood up here, and this support group all over the world provided streams of cash to support their fighters. But it also worked to try to influence other countries to change their policies on Israel and support Hamas. The Muslim Brotherhood quickly moved into the United States, and they set up one of these networks. And let me show you. Here's the Muslim Brotherhood. Here's Palestine. They set up Hamas. Then all over the world, and here in the United States, they put the Palestine Committee together. The Palestine Committee was broken up into three parts. The United Association for Studies and Research, that's a think tank. The Islamic Association of Palestine, that's in charge of propaganda. And the Holy Land Foundation, that's the fund. They were in charge of procuring and funneling money back to Hamas terrorists in Palestine. These three people are this: Okay, these three people came down here and they created the propaganda arm of CARE. CARE was created as a tool for the Islamic Association of Palestine by those three men, Nihad Awad, Omar Ahmad, and Rafiq Jabbar. Now, Awad and Ahmad, these two, all right, were both caught via FBI wiretap at an infamous Philly meeting. This is where law enforcement were able to verify that the Palestinian Committee, the U.S.-based Muslim Brotherhood, was discussing how they were going to continue to support Hamas. I want you to remember this man's face. It's very important. Now, the official court document that was annotating who was at the meeting in Philly is right here. Both of these men attended. Both of these men were key speakers. Ahmad was the person that actually set up the meeting and led the opening remarks. These are the founders of CARE. It is absolutely indisputable. CARE is Hamas. Nihad Awad continues to lead CARE to this day. This is who Omar is fundraising for next week, the propaganda arm for the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. Now, how is it nobody is interested in this? How come no one is pointing this out? The question that we have to ask ourselves, if all of that is true, which it is and verifiable, please do your own homework. Congresswoman Omar, is she ignorant of CARE's true identity, or is she a willing accomplice? Well, we have to go back to where she was born. She was born in Somalia, Mogadishu, in 1981. Then, because of this horrible civil war in Somalia, she had to leave. In 1992, she went to Kenya. In 1995, she was approved as a refugee, and she settled in Virginia and then quickly moved to Minnesota. In 2011, she graduated from the Humphrey School of Political Science and International Studies. Okay, while she was there, the Humphrey School is a place that has, the CARE has their tentacles all over this Humphrey School of Public Affairs. So when Amar was at Humphrey, this was the type of conferences being held there. Islam in the West, with the goal of, quote, pursuing development and enhancing understanding between Muslims and Western worlds. Okay, not bad. This event was co-sponsored, of course, by the Minnesota chapter for the Council on American Islamic Relations. Remember, also known as Hamas, the propaganda arm. Last summer, CARE was at the Humphrey School leading a challenging Islamophobia conference. Now, was it during this time when she was at the University of Minnesota that Omar got mixed up with the Hamas front group? We don't know. But we do know this. She is now fundraising for CARE next week. And it has been reported on recently that she has been fundraising for them for years. This is a CARE Minnesota advertisement for a fundraiser back in 2017. One of the noted speakers was the then state representative, Ilhan Omar. But still, useful idiot, or is she a willing accomplice? Well, it's one thing to show up for a few events for CARE at her school or for some random fundraiser, but it's not like she actually worked for CARE, right? Well, let's take a quick peek at her resume, displayed full view on her own website. Look at the top. Under Community Leader, former advisory board member for Minnesota Council on American Islamic Relations. So we have a sitting member of Congress who raises money for and used to work with an organization with direct ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas, a U.S. designated terror group. Now, as I said, CARE was founded as a propaganda arm for Hamas. So what if we found evidence that she was parroting the same kind of propaganda from the halls of Congress that CARE is putting out? Would that be grounds for at least a little intention? So Omar has gotten in trouble lately for making anti-Semitic comments. And the one that she really popped her head out with was in February. She said that the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, was controlling U.S. foreign policy. The outcry from both the Republicans and the Democrats eventually had her retract that. But she seemingly has made going after AIPAC somewhat of her own personal jihad. Now, isn't it interesting that if you go to CARE and you look at their press releases, the main target of CARE is AIPAC. They attack almost nonstop. These are just 15 of the unbelievable, unaccounted things that CARE has published on AIPAC. Now, I'd like to point out that AIPAC does spend a lot on lobbying, but they do not give a single dime directly to politicians. But CARE does. Now, if there was evidence that CARE was giving money to Congresswoman Omar, in light of her criticism of AIPAC, that would be a little embarrassing, wouldn't it? Oh, it is a little embarrassing, isn't it? So is she a hypocrite, or is she spreading propaganda exactly as she's being told to spread? Omar's anti-Semitism is dividing the Democratic Party. Even Rahm Emanuel is writing condemnations for Omar's actions and saying, what are we doing? The divide amongst the Democrats eventually led to a formal House vote to condemn anti-Semitism. But what they ended up passing was a blanket resolution condemning all hateful language. So in other words, yeah, what Omar said was bad and anti-Semitic, but we're not going to call her out by name, and instead we implore people just to talk nicely to each other in general. It was ridiculous. But how can the Democrats not be in agreement to chastise Omar and condemn anti-Semitism? Did some outside lobbying group known for propaganda pressure Democrats to leave Omar alone and water down the anti-Semitist talk? Well, here's a photo taken at the Capitol just before the House vote. The man standing next to Linda Sarsour is Nihad Awad, the same man that was the head of and founding member of CARE, and directly identified by the FBI as one of the Palestinian Committee members supporting Hamas.
So, my friends, for many years,
Omar's anti-Semitism led to criticism by Judge Jeanine, which led to a suspension by Fox News. Judge Jeanine was merely asking if her anti-Semitism comes from her Sharia compliance. Judge Jeanine also made the comment that Sharia is not antithetical to the Constitution. Quite frankly, that's where it's at, folks. Sharia is not is antithetical to the Constitution. Judge Jeanine said nothing wrong. So, many people have called Fox. We should let them have it. Continue to let them have it till she comes back on the air. You can see that they've ramped up their game, so they're going after anybody if they go after, even people on Fox. Next slide. Okay, I just read that. Next slide. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar are part of the Justice Democrats. Go to justicedemocrats.org and you'll see they're a radical group of progressives. And this is who the Muslim Brotherhood, they will be working with on a political level. Well, quite frankly, folks, they're in politics. It's not Islamophobia to criticize them. Okay, they're in politics. They are fair game, just like anybody in politics. So, next slide. Next slide. Jim Simpson is off this evening. As I said earlier, I'll be handling the questions when it's time for Q&A. Next slide. And tonight's speaker is Chris Gaubatz. And where are you, Chris? Oh, you're right there. Beautiful. Come on up. You know what? And, I always make a mistake. It seems like every meeting I make a mistake. So, take me out in the back, and I forgot your bio. So you got to tell everybody. Mind you, I have people watching online that don't know anything about you. So please tell them and fill them in. But that's it for me. I'll be back with Q&A. And please welcome Chris Gaubatz.
All right. Is that bothering you guys on the webinar? Sorry about that. I'll move.